Hi again, everybody. So just in case you didn't see the previous two videos where I reviewed Spider-Man and Spider-Man 2, what I'm doing is putting my thoughts about the Sam Raimi Spider-Man trilogy on camera in anticipation of the new Spider-Man film, The Amazing Spider-Man, which opens very shortly now. And now we come to the only Spider-Man film that I wasn't completely over the moon for. I'm not going to say that it's an altogether bad movie. There are parts of Spider-Man 3 that work very well. And the things that work in Spider-Man 3 are when it remembers what worked about the previous films, especially Spider-Man 2, when it shows us these intimate, emotional moments, when it brings the story back to the people, the characters involved. The problem with Spider-Man 3 is how big it is. It falls prey to the pitfall that Spider-Man 2 actually sidestepped very deftly, and that is that the longer the movie series goes on, the bigger the budgets get, and the bigger the story has to be, and the bigger the movie has to be. Spider-Man 3 is a very big movie. In terms of its length, in terms of its scope, its story, the number of characters it has, and also its tone. It has this big, epic, operatic tone. People make these grand emotional displays, these grand gestures. Spider-Man 3 is a really crowded movie. It feels like there are two or three movies constantly struggling for our attention. There's the black-suited Spider-Man stuff, which I found actually pretty entertaining. Everybody hates like the emo Peter when he has the black suit on and he goes and buys the new clothes and he flirts with the girls and dances at the club and combs his hair forward and just basically acts like a complete douchebag. I think that's hilarious. I'm not sure why everybody hates that. I mean, he's supposed to be a douchebag. We're supposed to laugh at him. We're not supposed to like him in those scenes. What I found most enjoyable about those was that he was still kind of a loser. It didn't make him more popular with women. You know, the girls that he flirts with on the street there, they think he's ridiculous. They laugh at him and walk away. So, I had no problem with that. But what I did have a problem with was there was that, which then led into the Venom stuff, which is really squashed into the last half hour or so of the film. And then there's also the Peter and Mary Jane story. And then there's also the Peter and Harry story. And then the Sandman is there as well. And there's just too much going on for any of it to really be done justice. Raimi really picks up on the notion from the Spider-Man comics that Spidey's rogues gallery is full of people that are or were close to him, either as Peter Parker or as Spider-Man. There are a lot of friends and former lovers in Spider-Man's collection of villains, and they make the Sandman into one of those. They pull the same sort of trick they did with Dr. Octopus, where they essentially take the character from the comics, but they just change the backstory a little bit to give him a much closer connection to Peter. And for Sandman, the way they do it is they sort of retcon the death of Uncle Ben to insert the Sandman as the accomplice of the robber who shot Uncle Ben. And in fact, they make it that the Sandman was the trigger man. The Sandman actually shot Uncle Ben. It was the robber who just jumped in the car and drove away when he saw that things were going wrong. And so the Sandman is actually Uncle Ben's murderer. And the comic geeks lost their shit over that. The same people that went like this for the organic web shooters, they couldn't stand that, and they couldn't stand making the Sandman Uncle Ben's killer either. I didn't mind. I thought it was fine. I think because it dovetails very nicely with the theme of the movie and with it helps Sam Raimi get where he's going with the movie. And it's one of the parts of the movie that works because it ties Sandman into Peter's story, and the stuff that is tied closest into Peter's story is the stuff that works. When you get into the Venom stuff that kind of feels tacked on, that's when it starts to lose its footing. I talk about how big the movie is, how operatic it is. The story between Harry and Peter is probably the biggest, most operatic part of the movie. And because it's so big, and because it happens so fast, and it's so melodramatic, it doesn't entirely work. But it works to the extent that it does because of the themes that are involved, and because the performers, James Franco and Tobey Maguire, for the most part do a very good job in playing it. I mean, there's a fight scene between them where Peter shows up with the black Spider-Man suit on underneath his clothes, and they have a fight scene, and it's very well staged and very well done, and it ends with Spider-Man throwing a pumpkin bomb back at Harry, one of the goblin pumpkin bombs, and it explodes in his face and scars his face really terribly. He has like a Two-Face look for the last act of the movie, where half of his face is really scarred and warped, and the other half is normal. And that feels kind of phony because it all happens in such a short length of time. Like, we see Harry get blown up, and then the next time we see him, and it doesn't feel like very much time has passed. The next time we see him, he's got this terribly scarred face. And it's all healed up, it's just scarred. And it just feels a little phony. It feels like not enough time has gone by for that. But again, that's sort of a lift from the comic books. Comic books, especially in the 60s, when a lot of this source material it was first published, did that a lot. They played fast and loose with timetables and time frames, and they were very melodramatic. Very theatrical, and Spider-Man 3 has that, for better or worse. As big and ungainly and not entirely successful and too long as the movie has been, it at least leads up to a really nice conclusion. Raimi has a nice way of concluding, of coming up with meaningful endings to his Spider-Man movies, and Spider-Man 3 does have a nice meaningful ending where there's a reconciliation between Harry and Peter and MJ as Harry is dying. Spoiler alert if you haven't seen this like 5-year-old movie. Harry Osborn dies, and he and Peter have reconciled, maybe a bit too easily, you could argue, given what has gone down between them. But nevertheless, it happens, and their final scene together is very nice. And when you look at it as if in the context of all 3 movies and remembering the relationship between Peter and Harry, it's a nice scene. And then there's a lovely scene with Peter and actually it's before the Harry scene. There's a lovely scene with Peter and the Sandman, and he's standing face to face with the man who earlier in the film he tried to kill, who killed his uncle, who took away his family, and Sandman explains that he's not a bad person. He was driven to these things because of his daughter, and he didn't ask to become what he is. That is the Sandman. And Peter tells him, I've done things I'm not proud of too, and I forgive you for what you did to me. And after he's forgiven, the Sandman just sort of blows off into the wind, and it's a really beautifully done effect. It's very lyrical, and the way they treat the Sandman in that scene. And also in the scene, a lot of the Sandman stuff is kind of dumb. It's just sort of big special effects CGI stuff that I don't really like. But that scene at the end when Sandman blows away after Peter forgives him, and then also the first scene when he is transformed into the Sandman, when he rises out of the sand and he's sort of trying to figure out how to put himself together. And it's done very, very beautifully. Really, really good use of CGI in that case. It's a really lovely, lyrical, mysterious, sort of wondrous scene. Spider-Man 3 is a very problematic film. It's not nearly as bad as its detractors say it is, but at the same time, it's a big step down from Spider-Man 2, especially, and Spider-Man. But Raimi pulls it together at the end. It's too long. There's way too much going on. It gets lost in the middle. Its theme doesn't always come through as clearly as maybe it should, but it pulls itself together and manages a really strong, really meaningful ending. And I give it credit for that. And I'm hoping that that one of the lessons that will be taken from the Raimi Spider-Man films and carried on into this new franchise, which I'm both curious and kind of cautious about, is that emotional intimacy, that feeling that it has to be about Peter and the people that Peter loves. It can't just be about Spider-Man swinging around and doing tricks and special effects. There has to be some meaningful relationships, and the themes have to be about the choices that people make, and what makes someone a hero, and what are the pitfalls of being Spider-Man. That's one of the things that Raimi just really, really got right in his three films, is that in the first film it was the origin, the power and responsibility. Even though you didn't ask for this, you have a responsibility to use these abilities that no one else has to help people and to put good into the world. That's the moral choice that Peter faces, and then in the second film, it's a continuation of that. It's, what do you use your talents for? Do you use your talents for good, or do you use your talents for destruction, as Dr. Octopus is misled into doing? And then in the third film, it's still that, but it's also, what do you do when you fail as the hero? When you either stop trying, or you try and you don't reach that goal that you're trying to reach, or you mistreat the people who you care about. What do you do? Do you humble yourself? Do you ask for forgiveness? When you're faced with a choice between either seeking revenge or seeking justice, or perhaps forgiveness, what choice do you make? Those are really, whatever you think of the films, those are really resonant themes, and those are really powerful questions for drama to wrestle with. And the fact that Sam Raimi's Spider-Man films are so interested in those questions is one of the things, perhaps the unifying principle that makes them so important to superhero films, and that makes them, when they succeed, as Spider-Man 3 occasionally does, makes them so much fun and so satisfying and so gratifying to watch. And I think they're right up there, especially the first two, especially the second one, but even Spider-Man 3 as a part of this series is an important film for modern superhero films, and deserves to be considered. Even if you decide that it's not a good movie, it at least deserves to be considered and analyzed before it's just outright dismissed.